All righty. Go ahead, Trevor.
All right, thanks, John. All right, thanks, guys, again for joining us today. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Alrighty, you guys should be able to see my screen now. All right, so today we're going to be covering a little bit more about OneDrive. So first, I just want to quickly touch base that this application is available on Mac as well as iOS devices. So this is the current OneDrive view that you'll see in Windows 10, the online version. There's also a desktop application as well. But let's go ahead. I'm going to show you the iPad OneDrive.
It's
so
also available for Android.
Right, and it's Android as well. So here is a little screenshot of what you'll see if you're on an iPad accessing it. And then this is kind of what it'll look like, a little bit different views if you're on an iPhone. And then additionally, Android also looks a little bit different, but for the most part, it's all pretty much streamlined. So here again, we have our file explorer. This is just my local machine. So what I have synced up with OneDrive. So you can see here the status. These files are available online, and they have some file sharing. I believe you guys already went over this. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of additional time. I just wanted to point out that from here, certain files you can share online as well, or share directly to other individuals. So I just wanted to point that out. But I'm going to actually open this up in the web version here. So in here, you can see these are all my files that you just saw. Just some random files here. Let's go ahead and actually show you how to share some files. So one thing that OneDrive is really great at is sharing large files. You can share your whole folder if you'd like, so it's pretty powerful in that sense. So like I said, if I just wanted to right click on my desktop, I could actually click share. And then let me go ahead and expand this menu because this is also really important. So for file security, this is where you want to pay attention to who you're sharing this link and who has access to edit. So if you sent this file out, or if I shared out this folder, anyone that I share this link with will be able to edit, make changes, do pretty much whatever they want with it.
And also importantly, they'll be able to forward that link to anyone else, and anyone else can use that link. So there's a security issue there. And this is the default behavior in OneDrive. So that's something to definitely pay attention to when you're selecting how you're sharing the file. You can change that behavior.
Absolutely. So going on down here, you would maybe want to select, if you only wanted people within your organization to only have this, maybe you want to select this option. You can also lock it down further to people that already have existing access to this folder. And then you could also just specify specific users and if you want to allow them to edit or not. So that was just sharing an example of sharing a folder. So we could also, let's just jump in the sample file here. We can also share out this file, and that's another great thing is OneDrive. You can share large files, small files. Doesn't really have too big of a problem with that. And again, in here, you might notice that this link looks a little bit different when we're sharing out a file. So again, if I wanted to share it out with anybody, I could do that. But again, remember, if this isn't something that you want being sent out to people outside your organization or being forwarded to random strangers, then I wouldn't share it. Just maybe like an advertisement that's a final copy, and maybe you can send that out like that. But again, down here, you have a couple extra options of how you can send this file out with what permissions. So here you can see that we have allow editing checked. And down here, you'll notice that the block download is disabled. Kind of common sense, I guess. If you're going to allow the person to edit, there's no reason to not have them be able to download that file. But when you uncheck this allow editing, you can then toggle whether or not you want that user to be able to download the file or just basically keep it read only. So we can kind of have that flexibility as well. Down here you can see we can set this link to expire on a certain date. So that's pretty handy. If you don't want this to last forever, just kind of lock it down further that way. And then of course you can always set a password that you can then provide to certain users as well. So after some time, you'll probably need to, figure out how you can see which folders and who has access to, which folders and files. So one thing you can see right off the bat, there's the sharing tab. So right here, you can see that these are all currently marked as private, so they shouldn't be being shared out to anybody. So if I go down to manage access, I'm currently the only one that has ability to see these files. So if I wanted to, however, share out a specific file, let's just go back into this test. And you can see this one is still showing as private, so I'm going to go ahead and share this out now.
So while he's doing that, I mean, I'd like to point out that this is actually a smarter way of sharing files than just attaching it to an email message and forwarding it out to people, because then people you literally have no control on how that file is shared. Once somebody else has possession of that document, they can forward it to anyone they want. Whereas with this, you have a lot of control over how that file is accessed in the future.
Absolutely, and that's very key, especially nowadays. And another thing I want to just point out, you can also copy this make a shareable link. So you can just share this out, or you can just send out an invite with your normal email. So go ahead and do this one more time. All right, so we can see that that link was sent to John now, so he should be getting that in a little bit of time. And you can also see now that the sharing tab is updated to show as shared. And then if you have a bunch of files and you wanted to kind of clean up which ones, or you want to just review who has access to those files or folders, you would then want to go to Manage Access. And then here you can see exactly who it was shared with. So this is pretty handy right here. So you can see that this was also shared to my personal account. And if at any time you want to revoke all access to people that you have shared this for, you can just stop sharing, click the stop sharing button right here. So let's go ahead and hop in this document really quickly here. And if John, if you can jump in here, perfect. So you can see I'm editing this file here, so I'll make some text. We're just typing away, but the really cool thing about this is you'll actually notice that John is also down here typing away. So we're both in this file co-editing together, so that's pretty handy. I know a lot of times one of the biggest problems with creating files, or at least trying to collaborate, is you'll open a file and it'll be locked for editing by somebody else. So this co-editing really allows that to kind of be mitigated in a sense. And then of course, since there are multiple people that can potentially be editing a certain file, the next thing you'll definitely want to make sure you have is abilities to go back to previous versions. You want to make sure you know how to delete certain files and certain edits, and then restore certain things if needed. So let's go ahead and touch on that really quickly. So let's go ahead and exit out of here. So if you ever need to review a previous version of a file, you can go ahead and click the three dots, the ellipsis right here, and then down to version history. If you select this, you can see the past versions of this file. So here you see the one that John and I were both just editing, so that's why it says just now. And then you can see we have a couple other files from a couple hours ago. So let's go ahead and open up this guy. Again, with the ellipsis, we can just hit open file. and it'll ask me if I want to open this in Word. So in here we can compare the previous version. So that's kind of handy if you ever need to. Usually, hopefully it's not a big problem for you guys where you have to go back and edit, and open up other files, but you can do that. And then also you can see that if you have a bunch of revisions, I believe the standard default is set to 500 versions. So if you don't need that many, you can definitely either edit the standard default, or you'll have to come in and just delete some versions.
It only saves deltas though, so there's no real downside to keeping the versions. It doesn't really chew up a bunch of storage.
Okay, so you could probably be safe with just leaving them alone then.
I would say, yeah, most people don't manage their versions. You can, but there's no real need to.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't really imagine why. Okay, perfect. So that was just how you can actually go back and open up other versions if you needed to.
So as a point, going back to this, because this is important, I think. So when you clicked on a version, Trevor,
mm-hmm.
Go ahead and click on the little ellipses. You have two options. So you can restore it right there. So you can restore a previous version, or you can open it. And like he pointed out, when you open it, you have a choice of restoring it, but you also can save it somewhere else. So you can keep that other version as a a co-version with the existing version. So this is a previous version, or is this the previous version or is this the current version?
Yes, this is current version or previous version. I had some edits in here.
So he could then type file save as and store this previous version as a different name and keep both of them. So I think something to keep in mind when you're managing your files.
Right. And you can see here, there's the sample 2 that we just saved as from the previous version. So again, if you ever wanted to, let's say we wanted to keep sample 2 instead of the first sample, we could go ahead and just delete this guy right here. And it does give you a warning if somebody is in the file before you delete it, so that's handy as well. But if you ever needed to restore that file, you have your own recycle bin in OneDrive. So here you'll see that your sample file is right here. So it's not permanently deleted. It's the key takeaway here. It's just removed to the recycle bin. Very similar to your Windows desktop. When you accidentally delete a file, it goes to your recycle bin. Unless you actually purge your recycle bin up here, that's when it will be gone. So here, if you ever wanted to restore this, you could just click this file and then hit restore. And it should put it back right in the original location that it was deleted from. So we just have to, once we hit restore, we'll have to go back to our documents desktop test, and we should see our sample file there. So I'll go ahead and restore this guy.
One thing to point out too is there's a second stage recycle bin. So if you've emptied your recycle bin and said, oops, there's still another way to go get it back.
Oh, okay. I actually didn't notice that. Is this the final recycle bin?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. So don't delete it from both.
So don't delete it from the second stage recycle bin. That's sneaky.
Another cool thing is that shared item. So if you look at under Trevor Smith, it says shared. This is where you can see files that have been shared with you. So that's pretty cool. So these are all files that other people have shared with Trevor.
And then from here, of course, I can share them out further, preview them, get some additional details. So there's...
So any questions so far? We're moving A lot faster than I anticipated.
Yeah, we are going pretty quick, I guess.
So we have plenty of time to do Q&A or drill into something deeper that you guys are interested in. So is there something you guys would like to visit deeper or explore today? Feel free to unmute and speak up. Anything anybody would like to revisit from yesterday? Why don't we touch on SharePoint a little bit? They're not really using SharePoint, but it's similar to OneDrive, but more collaboratively based.
Okay.
They're not going to have a lot of people licensed for SharePoint at this point. But open a SharePoint library.
Yeah, so this is SharePoint. So SharePoint, well, I think I usually think of SharePoint generally like a library for your actual organization. So Holt might have a SharePoint that they then add users in groups or create groups and then add users to. So in here, we're going to jump into one of the groups that J4 has. So this is our internal projects group within SharePoint. So in here, you can actually see some of our conversations. Oops.
Hi, Gail.
How are you?
Good. This is John and Trevor. Trevor's been presenting today. We actually got through the material pretty quickly today, so we're going to contrast that to a SharePoint library and take a look at it. But do you have anything, since you weren't able to join us earlier, that you want to go back and revisit?
No, I had all my questions answered yesterday afternoon, so I'm good.
Okay. Today we covered sharing, versioning, and then going back to, and recovering previous versions or saving them as a different file. We also recovering deleted files. So a few other things.
So does the recovering have to be done by the owner, or is there an administrator that can do that in the event that, say, you've been hit by ransomware and every single 900 files were destroyed?
So it's unlikely that yeah, I guess it could happen, but you're going to have yeah, I don't know that there's a way to administratively do it. Headset blinking out. Go back to the OneDrive, Trevor.
Well, so it just recently happened to another dealer. 700 of them got destroyed. They said that it was quite an effort to be able to get access so they could go back in and recover.
I'd have to look into it a little bit deeper. I haven't tried that, but there is a recycle bin right here, which has your deleted files, and then there's a second stage recycle bin, which has your emptied recycle bin files. So you have two opportunities to recover files that have been deleted. And further than that, there is a way, what you're talking about, but you have to actually call Microsoft. You have to open a ticket, and they can, on the back end, they keep, I believe, 2 weeks of retention on the back end.
Yeah, see, I thought it was 30 days. That's what I was reading.
It's not 30 days. I believe it's 14 days.
Okay.
But it is there. You don't, as an administrator, you really can't do it yourself. You do have to open a ticket with Microsoft, though, and we have had to do that before. And then there's also versions, and this is where it saves up to 500 versions. So if you click on Files, and then go to one of your files with the version. It will save, by default, the number is 500. It'll save 500 different versions, which are deltas. So if the files get changed versus deleted, you can recover from that as well. Now, if you're not syncing, so we covered syncing yesterday, remember? Where you sync your OneDrive to your local computer. If you're not syncing, then you're not really at too much risk for one of those viruses. If you're syncing and you delete files, they'll get deleted here as well, and then you'll have to go into the recycle bin.
Well, yeah, but
or they get changed. Basically, they get changed.
You can't control 900 people easily.
I get it.
You say, "Oh, don't sync," and then the first person out the gate would sync. I mean, that's
I
not,
get it. Realistically, they're going to sync.
Practical. I mean, I can't. I mean, I struggle with that because no matter what you say, it just. I mean, I don't think we're going to have that opportunity. You know, it's not going to be that easy for us.
I get it.
We just want to make sure that the owner is responsible for whatever they do, and they'll have to take that, ownership to that, and that's it. I mean, I'm thinking more on a high scale ransomware hit, which is what happened to this dealership, and it basically destroyed everything out in OneDrive for all their employees. So they had to recover them all, and I would assume they went back to that 14-day recovery.
Yeah, and that's there. You can do that. But like I said, you have to do that through Microsoft. There's no admin tools for it that I know of.
Yeah, they did mention something of that. Okay.
Yes.
We're trying to write some guidelines around this, and that's why we have some sections that clearly outline this, and users will know what they're up against. I think the one thing, and I don't know if Nick is on here, but the one thing we probably didn't include in our guidelines was the ability to synchronize. That part needs to be in there so that everybody understands clearly what that means.
Okay. And synchronize is a powerful tool, so I'm not saying don't do it, because it does allow you to access the files a lot easier from your local computer in File Explorer. So I'm not necessarily saying not to do it, even though there is less.
Yeah, no, and I'm not either, because I know even if I said not to do it, they do it. So we aren't going to say not to do it. We just want to make sure they clearly understand what that means in our guidelines.
Right. Understood. All right. Anything you want to revisit from yesterday or even today?
So we just briefly discussed, ultimately moving everything off our servers over to SharePoint, and anything personal would move over to OneDrive. In regards to SharePoint, is there anything that you can think of we might, that kind of goes outside the box of OneDrive, but it's similar? Anything we might need to know about that?
So for migrating files, there's a few ways to do it. One of the things we can do, and it's a little more complicated because it requires some. This isn't something your average user is going to do, but there are some tools with IE, the older version of the browser, where we can actually map a drive letter to a SharePoint library, and then you can use things like Robocopy to get the files there.
Okay. All
so
right,
just to make the migration a little easier.
All right.
Some of the tools.
So then okay, so then if you've got access set up currently with your Active Directory in your file share server, does that same role, does all that access come across the same if you do that? Or will you have to correct it once it gets to the new location?
If you're trying to save metadata, that gets tricky. Metadata could be, like the created by dates and created by all that information. It's not impossible, but it takes a little more effort to save that metadata. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, no, I was Yeah, I mean, that would be important too, but I know when currently right now on our file share, we define who gets access to those files.
Oh,
And
permissions are,
would
yeah,
that
we
copy across?
not copy, but we usually manage permissions by group.
Well, no, we manage permissions by group too. So that's been going on for years. What I'm asking is that if you bring those over through your robocopy, do all those permissions come with it?
No, they don't. You're gonna have to reapply permissions.
Oh, okay, that's what I want to hear. I figured as
sorry,
much. All right. I was
didn't
hoping that
say
you wouldn't say that, but I figured I got to go through the program to find out.
But if you're doing it by group, if you're doing file level permissions, they're a little bit more difficult in SharePoint. You can do it, but I don't really recommend it. You can make them read only fairly easily, but doing file level permissions is not easy. It's typically library level is what you do, or folder level, but typically library level.
Okay.
But if you did
That's
want to
good.
make a set of files read only, that's not that hard. But
Right.
for the most part, permissions should be managed on the library level just to keep it simple. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine.
Plan.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we have hundreds of these, so I don't really know it'll be that simple when we do it, but we can move it slowly.
Well,
one at a time, I guess. We're just not there yet. Our goal is to try to get the company rolled over to OneDrive. The problem with that is that everybody's used to, it's like when you said yesterday, personal files and shared files or group files, you call them group files and personal files. Well, to the company, the people look at that as just, well, I don't differentiate it between them. And so we're trying to differentiate them because that's what we do, but they're not really differentiated. To them, it's all their files. They don't care where they're at. And they share some, others they don't. So it's difficult to determine of our current file share system we have today on our server. There's 1,000 shared documents in there. Of that 1,000, 500 of those could be considered in what you were training yesterday, they're personal documents. Sure. I don't know which ones they are, and neither do they. So you'd have to take one file at a time. Say, is this your personal? Is this a shared? Is this your personal? Is this a shared? And you'd have to really go through and figure it all out so that you knew which ones went to SharePoint and which ones went to their personal OneDrive. That's I don't, and maybe I'm making it too complicated, but that's right now, everything is pretty much housed in a file share server and or their PC. But
yeah, it's more about control of the document. So you can still share a document from your OneDrive. We went through that today. And you can have a lot of control over how that document's shared. So you can say this link has a time to live. It's only good for a week or a month. I'm only going to grant read-only access, or I'm going to grant this group the ability to change it. So the person who owns that document has a lot of control if it's in their OneDrive. Whereas in a SharePoint library, anybody who's been granted permissions at the library level typically all have the same rights to those documents and have the same ability to manage those documents. So it's more of a control thing rather than, or am I sharing it thing. Does that make sense? Ownership or control of the document.
Yeah, I don't think that's the way it's used here. I don't. They just think of it, drop it into a kind of a shared folder where everybody can get to it. It's not to control it. It's a place where everybody can get to a document.
And that's certainly the easiest. If a document's going to be shared amongst everyone in the company, dropping it into a SharePoint library makes the most sense that everybody has access to.
Yeah, I just
because then you don't have to manage access to it. You don't have to grant somebody rights to share it. They're just automatically granted rights by being part of that group that has rights to that library, whether it's read-only or read-write or whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay. So, So currently right now, I know this sounds like I'm making it complicated, but currently right now, a user has a document on their PC, they cannot share that with anybody. It belongs and lives on their drive on their computer, okay? To get it, to share it with anyone else, they have to go drop it into the shared server. Okay, that's the only way they can do it. Otherwise, they have to attach it in an email and email it out to people. Okay, now,
which is
once
kind
they
of
move to OneDrive, now they have the ability to share as if they're dropping it into a file server, and all they have to do is use the share functionality and share it with somebody publicly or share it to the individual. So it just seems a little bit, that maybe we have to draw pictures for them. I don't know. Maybe you just let them decide and they can drop it wherever the heck they want to drop it. I don't know.
So let me. Yeah,
confusing.
so let's look at OneDrive like we do your, like you said, your personal computer, if you're storing a file on the computer. I would say most people's instinct when they want to share a file with Betty across the hall, they don't drop it into another file server location. They attach it to an email and they email it to Betty. That's what they're doing. And that's what we're trying to alleviate with OneDrive. Instead of sending the file, which could be a very large file, and then once you sent the file via email, you have no control over that file. Betty can send it out to anyone that she wants, make changes to it, etc. With OneDrive, you have a lot more control over that file, and you can share large files without a problem because you're sharing a link to that file. You're not sharing the file, and you have control over that link. And one of the things we showed earlier was that you can actually prevent people from downloading it. You can make it so they can just view it. Or they can download it, edit it, whatever they want to do, if you've given permission in that link that you sent for the file. And you're not sending the file, so you're not sending this big file out to 20 people or whatever and using up space by doing that. So OneDrive is, you have a lot of ability to share a file, but you have a lot of control over that ability. Whereas when you send an email to Betty with a file attached, you don't have any control once you've sent that email. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, but these people are used to using Dropbox and Google, so they already know about how to share. So that's not
it's
anything
similar to
that's
that.
Yeah, it's very similar. But honestly, I'm not really sure why they'd ever need SharePoint if they're going to manage documents that way. I guess maybe then it comes back to, like you said, something you want to control. And if you want to control, say, the financials, for example, then you would put those maybe on SharePoint, but everything else is just managed by the employees in regards to documents.
So an example of a SharePoint library might be, maybe you've got a bunch of forms like W-2 forms, PTO request forms, HR type forms, let's say, employee manuals. You can make those read-only in a SharePoint library and give everybody access just by group membership. You don't have to click and share it with them. So you don't have to take an extra.
Yeah, that's clear. That's clear. We use a different system for that. It's called Mango. So, but that's not what's being stored in our file server today. What you just used example. What they are literally storing in there are, I'm going to say reports might be an example.
A report's a good example. So you could have reports that are accessed by, maybe they're only managed by a small group, but maybe they're accessed by a larger group. And so again, group membership gives you access. You don't have to specifically send an email with a link and all that other stuff. So putting them in SharePoint allows you to grant access. Another thing with SharePoint is if you end up using Teams at all, everything's back-ended in SharePoint. So here's an example of like a project we were working on. This is our server consolidation project for J4. So I've got a spreadsheet with all my servers listed and current status of what's happening to that server. Are we retiring it? What are we doing with that server? Migrating it to a new OS. So this is an ongoing spreadsheet that everybody in this group, it's back-ended in SharePoint, and everybody who's in this project, part of this internal projects team, has access to the spreadsheet and they can modify it. I don't have to grant them access. Just by being a member of this team, they're granted that access. And that's a tool that we use, those types of files.
Okay, that's good.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
I could have stuck it in OneDrive and then shared a, sent a link out to all those people, but then I'm having to create more work for myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, either way, we have a job ahead of us to pretty much go through everything that's in our entire file share today, before we determine what direction it's going in. Either it's going back to the user to be owned by the user as a personal document, or it needs to land in the SharePoint server to be utilized by either a project application, a form, a report. I don't know, we'd have to define what that is. Otherwise you end up with this sprawl,
Yeah,
and
no, I
which has
agree.
taken about 25 years for us to get to that point, and now I have the sprawl. So I have to somehow take all of this and figure out how to organize it going back into the cloud from, on the server today. And
Right.
I would think that every business is having this challenge, and or either that or they just don't care and they're sending it all into one place and say, we'll just send the sprawl into the same area up on the cloud and you'd be done with it.
You get
that's
some
an
of both.
option too.
Yeah, you get some of both, just because managing documents is also a lot of work. And so it's, with the cost of disk space today, sometimes it's easier just to let the sprawl happen. I'm not saying it's a good idea, but that's what we see.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because the effort to clean it up is tough.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's no magic to this science on it. Obviously, we'll figure it out, and at least we've got it in some sort of structure today where we can at least get, part of it organized, and the rest of it we'll just have to send it where where it makes sense.
All right. Thank you, Gail.
Otherwise, that's all I had. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for hopping in and adding some value here.
Okay.
I appreciate it. All right. And then if you come up with anything else, just feel free to email me and I'll respond right away.
No, just a question for the group that's on here. Would this be good training for the rest of the organization as we start rolling this out?
I think so.
Okay. All right. So we'll be definitely probably scheduling some more classes for the rest of the company.
Okay. And if you want to, we can, combine the two classes into one curriculum if you want.
Yeah, I think that would be better. And just make it an hour. I think that's all that, you could keep their attention to, but yes, that'd be great.
All right. All righty. Thank you.